Hi everyone, it's Ella. Happy Earth Week. I hope you all are doing well during this time of quarantine and that you guys are staying safe and at home. As many of you know, in grade 11 we must complete an integrative project. So I decided to focus mine on environmental activism, but more specifically focused on the movement that our generation has started. So this pandemic did force me to change my project a little, but overall, this has been a very unique experience for me, and I was taught how to adapt under unforeseen circumstances. So this panel discussion will be between three young Canadian environmental activists, and I will be moderating this discussion. The topic is environmentalism during the COVID-19 crisis. I really hope you enjoyed this discussion. Let's go meet the panelists.
So my name is Aziza. It's nice to meet you guys. Currently, I'm part of the World Vision Youth Council, and World Vision is an NGO that mainly operates, for development aid, and one of their biggest goals is like lessening the use of child labor and a lot of supply chains. So for me, I'm also a political science student, and I really within the political science realm, I really like to kind of take that environmental spin on things. And so when I'm volunteering with World Vision, that's kind of the approach I also take. So this past year, we were working on a sustainable fashion show, basically incorporating fair trade fashion brands and kind of showing people, an alternative way to consume.
I'm Katie. I've was very fortunate to be homeschooled, and my mom made activism part of our homeschool education. So I've been an activist of many different forms since I was around 8 years old, maybe. And so I definitely focus more on direct, nonviolent in-person actions. So it all started when I live near the Gatineau River, and there was talks of having a garbage dump be implemented right by the Gatineau River, which would have leaked into the water. And so it started there. And then more recently, I've been working alongside both Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth in Ottawa as one of the organizers when it comes to solidarity actions with the Wet'suwet'en solidarity actions in Ottawa. So that includes multiple marches and rallies, but also the Department of Justice occupation.
Hey, my name is Albert. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to see you here. So yeah, I think, my activism started far back. So I think for as long as I can remember it, I was in alternative school and I had all this freedom to just undergo all sorts of projects. And I mean, more recently, the last year has been very intense. I mean, the Fridays for Future movement, climate strike, has really risen, and I've been part of it since its beginning in Montreal. And we started working with the university students that were also behind this march as soon as we started existing. And now we're all part of one student coalition that's present, that exists in more than 40 campuses across Quebec. So it's known as la CEVES, so roughly translated as Student Coalition for Environmental and Social Change. And so we stand for many things, and our vision is that I mean, we're demanding bold climate action, and this has to come with bold social changes also. And so fighting inequalities is as much a part of our fight.
So now we can get into the questions. So what do you believe our global response to COVID-19, so for example, our quick policy implementation, says about the future of the fight against climate change?
Okay, so in terms of our quick response, I thought about it a lot. Like from the outset of the pandemic, when it started getting really serious, it was the question that came up in my mind the most often is why, are we so quick to implement change in terms of crises like these, and when there are like legitimate other crises that are, that also warrant, a lot of attention and a lot of action, like climate change. And so I think the nature of both crises kind of stood out to me. So, COVID is something that was really fast paced and fast moving, and it was like right at our doorsteps, right away. And so there was cause for alarm, there was cause for urgency. And with the environment, though, like, it's something that's pretty slow moving. And in Canada, uniquely, we don't see those impacts as much as we would, in other places around the world. And so I think that when it comes to, incorporating climate change within that discussion, we need to talk about, who are we trusting, I guess, and who are we following? Because a lot of times, a political question is, oh, do you believe in climate change or something like that? But at this point, it's, oh, do you understand climate change, right? So when it comes to, asking that question, it's making sure you trust the most current science, and science is in agreement that, yeah, climate change is a big deal, it's happening, and we need to address it. Now, I think that the public can get really exhausted with that dialogue really quickly, because you have a lot of political discourse on it, and it becomes a really political issue. So when it comes with incorporating it into a realistic policy framework, I imagine that we kind of need to meet Canadians where they are, so essentially incorporating environmentalism into what's already happening, and giving that environmental spin on the issues that are already present in our lives. I feel like that makes it easier to have that action take place, rather than giving that one line toward one aspect of the environment, like, we need to work on this. The environment is present in all these issues, and it can be incorporated in all these issues, and we can work towards being better towards our environment within the framework of all these issues.
I think what our response to the COVID crisis has shown me is, first of all, I think we all know, and everyone on this panel at least knows, that before the COVID crisis, there was an ongoing crisis, and that was the climate crisis. And I think that I don't think that our response to COVID reflects how we are responding to the climate crisis, simply because, to give an example of how we've been responding so far, yes, Canada did declare a national state of climate emergency. I believe it was in June. If I'm wrong with that, somebody can correct me, but I believe it was in June we declared a state of national emergency in regards to climate change. And then the very next day, the Trudeau government bought a $4.5 billion pipeline, which, as we know, is not a positive step towards serious climate action. And I think that Trudeau and his government's actions speak louder than their words, when clearly we are capable as a nation, as a country, to react to a crisis. COVID has shown us that we are able to take serious issues seriously. And I think it's disappointing to me, at least, that the government hasn't been treating the climate crisis as the serious issue that it is. So I think it shows that we have the potential for serious change, and we have the potential to, as communities, pull ourselves together and to unite together. And as a country, we have the potential to deal with situations like this.
So this whole thing leaves me very doubtful. Because on one hand, at the beginning, I was really surprised that, for the one time, there were scientists sitting at the table during the press conferences, and they were telling, like, science tells us to do this, this, and that, and the government were like, okay, well, we're going to do this, this, and that, and that's what we need with climate change. Although, science is political, and we can treat science as, there's multiple sciences, and so there's multiple standpoints on this, and so everything can be, you can use science in many ways. So just doing what a scientist will say is not necessarily what is required, what we have to do. So we have to see the bigger picture now, when it's about climate change. But I think that it still was a very powerful image in my mind, and I was like, oh wow. Surprisingly, I think it's not a surprise, but I don't really appreciate my governments, because I think I'm also a plaintiff on the LaRose versus Her Majesty the Queen lawsuit against the federal government for its failure to act on climate change, and for its affirmative action that's worsening climate change and threatening and violating our fundamental human rights. And so, the idea is the governments are threatening our future by their actions on climate change. And so now I saw them act for, the sort of what I consider the common good, and protect, in order to protect the most vulnerable and everything. And, now that I took a step back, and I think, they would obviously, we see what Trump has done. And, I don't think that it would be, the population would never have accepted that they let if our governments had left the elderly and so many other vulnerable people die for out of corporate interests. So I think that they're not so I'm questioning that now. And I also think that this vision of the common good is very limited. For example, I'm thinking of the man camps that are, this coastal gas line pipeline is still under construction. Near the Wet'suwet'en camps are, camps with 100 of men that are just, going back and forth to like southern BC, or more densely populated regions. And so this really creates like an incubator for the virus, close to communities that don't have, that are systemically discriminated, and that don't have um, proper, and that for this reason don't have proper sanitary infrastructure. So I think that the common good is limited, and is I now am more critical of that vision, of that image that they try to project also. And so I think that it's always important not to lose sight of where the interests are. And so that's human rights violation. Like they're putting life at risk, and they're sending the clear message that indigenous lives and Wet'suwet'en lives are not worth as much as the elderly, white Canadian. Does show us that if we put people before profit, and if in addition we could separate oil and state, it would, we can do it, and we're capable of very quick change.
I think that this leaves us, like our response, do you think that it leaves you more hopeful for how our fight against climate change is going to evolve, or like how the government's response is going to evolve, like in the future? Are you hopeful for it to for us to move forward, or do you think that we're just going to stay kind of where we are now?
Right. So I think what Albert said with the the system overall, it's still the same system that we live under. It's still the same government. So in terms of change in the future, and hope towards what will be done towards climate change, I think that remains an uphill battle, and it's going to be won through like the hard work of people that are focused and are determined to have these narratives heard, and make sure like and I think that really needs to continue. I think that it's probably not going to get easier, but I mean that hope, the same hope that I had before, is what it is now, and so I think what I'm hoping to do is just work with the system as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think what Albert said, like, totally, I don't know if you could see me like nodding my head, and I was totally in agreement with what he was saying, is that, you know, CGL is still pushing through to get this pipeline built. They've got pipes coming in, and when, you know, Indigenous youth are just driving by, practicing social distancing, driving by just to see what's happening, being super peaceful, not violating any laws. They're just driving, and they get met with, you know, police harassing them, and police and RCMP who are not practicing social distancing. You know, pipeline workers who again are not practicing social distancing. Not only is that, you know, extremely dangerous for the workers themselves, but more importantly for the Wet'suwet'en people, and it's their land. So I think to me, I mean, I was already quite, I feel like my eyes were kind of open to this already, but I feel like Canada's just showing their true colors more and more, that that unlike the COVID crisis, the climate crisis is not something that they're taking seriously. It's not something that they truly, excuse me, truly show any intention of um, of fighting and of correcting. I think that, I don't know, it just speaks so loudly to me that their intentions and their that they're choosing, you know, profit over the people and profit over Indigenous land. And I feel that after, you know, once the COVID crisis calms down, and we're in the process of healing, I think that we will be left with possibly a bigger mess to clean up than we had before, because we don't have the luxury of going out and mobilizing and taking to the streets and making our voices heard in a unanimous way.
I do recognize myself a lot in what Caddy just said. So I think that, you know, there's like two sides. So on one side, you know, the government's actions have made me very cynical lately. Like, you know, they're taking a very authoritarian turn. They're using the situation, they're using the misery, there's they're using the death of people and the distraction it causes, and the fact that we're all under lockdown, to pass new projects. I'm thinking about now they cancel like the public consultation process for offshore platforms, and like close to Newfoundland. Like they're just, you know, the consultations are going on while no one is really able to participate, and while it's very limited, and that's going to be permanent. So there will be no more consultation for any project in that zone. So that's one thing. And then the approval of Keystone XL. And then the other, you know, the human rights violation that consists in just, you know, bringing the virus to communities that don't even have, you know, running water. So I think that, you know, this is very alarming. Afterwards, you know, we'll have to, the fight is going to have to, you know, we're going to have to be very proactive. um I don't know how we're going to do it, honestly. But on the other side, I'm like, the people are maybe filling me with hope, because I think that, you know, just I don't think that capitalism is being questioned by the response the governments have had to this crisis, to the COVID crisis. But I think that productivism is, in our individual lives. Like we have more time to think. People are having their own reflections, and at the same time, the inequalities that have always been there, are now, you know, they're really under the spotlight. Like, you know, it makes them more visible. The people who can pay their rents, the people who need, you know, food help, you know, it's not, you know, it's the people who, generally the people who are able to work from home and keep a salary, are the ones, you know, are pretty privileged, are educated people, are people that already have a fair, you know, fair wages. um and so, you know, I think that this can stimulate the people's reflections, and that this can, after the crisis, probably spark a different response, and can, I think it's the best moment to radicalize ourselves and to challenge the system and to question it and to be stronger after. So I think it's a real moment of like popular education.
So my next question is, how have you been continuing your activism during the pandemic?
Um, yeah, so for myself, I mean, I think a big thing that's been coming up has been online actions. There's been like a variety of online actions that have been taking place. And then just, I think it's really important in a time like this to recognize who is still fighting the good fight, who is still on the front line. So supporting frontline workers, frontline land and water defenders as much as possible, whether that be donating, or I know on the, I think it's the unistoten.camp website, there's a list of supplies that the camp needs. And then just making sure that everything and anything that happens on the front lines is being broadcasted through social media. Sorry, broadcasted through social media, especially since the media safety net is no longer there because the media is focusing on the COVID crisis, and which is understandable, but that does mean that those on the front lines don't have the protection of having the injustices that are happening being broadcasted and shown. So just watching, keeping an eye on what's happening, sharing, their stories through social media.
Me, I've been kind of focusing on also I've noticed, the gap in transparency, and a lot of times, a lot of people don't know what's happening in terms of the response to the environmental crisis. And so, for me, I wanted to, this was something that I'd wanted to do early on, but I think, the time and also, the space has really given me the opportunity to work on these issues. So what I've been trying to work on is how we can incorporate, these issues into experiential learning programs. So a lot of the times, we're students. We have the benefit of having those high school and university environments. They're environments that are for learning. Yet there are still, a lot of gaps in terms of what mediums are available for you to kind of pick up knowledge, for you to learn, for you to grow skills. And so I think that in order to kind of fill that gap, I've really been focusing on how we can incorporate environmental issues and environmental awareness and activism into experiential learning programs within the university for students, to kind of give them not only like a meaningful experience, but one that'll kind of stay with them. I think that planning for initiatives after the crisis is always something that can keep you going and keep you hopeful in terms of what will happen, after all this is over.
Honestly, I don't know how it's gonna turn out. We had a week of strike that was planned. So from March the 30th to April 3rd, we were supposed to have, we already had, I think, 25,000 students that had voted to strike for the entire week. So we had to cancel this, obviously, and so we transferred it. The whole concept was the week of transition. So what we saw was that people have more, it's more easy for people to imagine the end of the world than it is for them to imagine a solution. I mean, most of the time. So we need to challenge this, because we can't have hope. We can't fight if we don't have the feeling. We can't ask the people to fight if they don't have the feeling that this is going to make a difference. And so we needed to instill that hope in people and to motivate them. We transferred it into an online mobilization, so that's very limited. We had webinars. It was mostly focused on community building, because what we see as a solution to the climate crisis is a lot of community. When we talk about degrowth, as an alternative to capitalism, and on infinite growth, economic growth using infinite resources, and then as if they were infinite, although available in limited amounts. It's a good moment for um, popular education to learn, to push our reflections, to try to have just improve ourselves, have the discussions we need to have internally, just learn. We're activists, but we have a lot to learn, and as an organization, what should be the best practices, um, what how we should work. We're also internally we're reviewing our structure, and I think it's going to be a lot of strategizing, but then it's also super hard to strategize when we don't know when it's going to end. I personally hate petitions, and that's pretty much like the most powerful thing we can do right now. So I think it's that makes me very cynical, and but I think we have no choice to just keep pushing. And then I think it's a lot about solidarity. There's all crises will create solidarity bounds, and we have to push for it and be part of this construction. And we're just, I don't know, like me and my activist friends, we just wrote poems on posters and just put them all around the city. And that's, I think that's, poetry is activism also. I think, I really believe in the place the arts should take in activism, and I think that it's a great moment to create, if we have the peace of mind to do it.
In the past, a lot of people have connected the economy and the environment and saying that one cannot really work with if the other one is doing well. So if the economy is doing well, the environment is going to be negatively affected, and vice versa. So do you think that this pandemic will really kind of further that thinking?
I would say that I certainly hope not. I certainly hope that that's not the conclusion that people make out of this. That it's we need to take care of our economy first. I think I will say though, as a student, I don't understand the dynamic between the economy and the environment like fully. Like I don't have the most knowledge that would make me I have a general knowledge. So I think the best way that I can answer that question is in terms of the conclusions that people draw after this pandemic, related to the economy and environmentalism. Those conclusions largely stem from not understanding the system and a place of like a gap in knowledge. This is a really great time for you to take a step back, look at what's happening in terms of our social economic situation, and we can kind of gather ourselves and think okay, so what now, what am I going to do about this, right? So for me, I have a lot more time to plan out initiatives that kind of help people learn more about the way these dynamics work and interact, and how we as students from our positions are able to affect that impact.
It's true that we often see it as whether it's the economy or the environment, but I think I think it's important to always remind ourselves of what the Greek root of just economy, the word economy means. It's like how we administrate our home and our environment. So it the first meaning of it is not necessarily linked to what we consider like financial, any financial concept. It's just how we better administrate our the place we share to live. So I think that we have to change the perspective we have on economy in general. And for example, like right now, millions of people are losing their jobs all around the world. But at the beginning, the stock markets dropped a lot, but now they're doing just fine. And I think it says a lot on how what we see as the economy, like the global finance, is just separate from actual real life, and it impacts it in a lot of ways, through the political games, because their interests always weigh a lot. But I don't think that, we have to disconnect those two concepts. I think that, yes, winning at the same time, yes, there's a lot of economical losses right now. At the same time, we can see that the system can slow down and no one, a lot of people are harmed because this was done in a rush, and this was not done with regards to equality, to social justice. But it was not. But if we slow down in an organized way, in a way that is planned and that is thought of in order to reduce the inequalities drastically, I think that it can drive us, somewhere interesting. And this shows us that the system slows down, and nothing is exploding. Like there's a lot of suffering because of this poverty that already existed and that was caused by this system, but still, like, nothing exploded, and now the state is giving money to the people who need it the most. I don't think it's enough. They should suspend the rent payments, as they have suspended the mortgages payments.
Yeah, I really like what you said, Albert, that it doesn't have to be an either or. I think people treating it as an either or is an excuse. And I mean, I think every time I hear politicians speak, they're masters of making excuse. It's just like their trademark. That's part of what has kept us stuck in this mindset of not prioritizing the health and safety of our planet. And I think, yeah, I mean, there's that really catchy phrase that people say that I think is so true, that we are so used to choosing profit over people, and we start choosing people over profit, and that slowing down our economy will not mean the end of the world for our country. Our country in its economic form, I mean, I really don't spend that much time focusing too much on the side of the economy, since I often focus more on the side of the environment. But it shows that it's possible, right? This pandemic has showed that slowing down, that taking a step back is possible, that we are capable to do it as a country. And I think I mean, I can't reiterate this enough, how disappointing it is that they can slow down the economy, but they're still ramping up the destruction of our environment, the destruction of Indigenous land. I think I really hope that after this, I hope that it's an eye opener to people who had their eyes closed before, that while I mean, those of us on this panel and so many people have the privilege of staying home, of being able to wash our hands, of being able to, to have the resources to keep ourselves safe. And that not to make an assumption that everyone on this panel has those resources, but the majority of people do have those resources. But so many people don't. And those are the people that are being affected by this pandemic most. And those are the same people who are being affected by climate change. So I really hope that those who have the privilege to make it through this pandemic will rise up and fight against the other major crisis that is ongoing.
So that was my last question. I hope that this panel opened your eyes to some of the big issues facing Canada and environmentalism today, and how COVID-19 has impacted some of the movements happening. I was so inspired by these activists to learn more about the socio-economic dynamics within the climate crisis, and to share this knowledge with others in my community. Please share your own opinions down below in the comments, because I'm so interested to hear what you guys have to say. Finally, I want to thank my 3 guests, Aziza, Albert, and Katie, for participating. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!